My name is Keith Marzullo, and I'm the Dean of the College of Information Studies. Welcome to the first Dean's Lecture Series of the academic year 2023-2024. We're trying something new this year in my college. We are first going to have 3 Dean's Lectures, and each one of them is partnered with another unit. And this one is partnered with journalism. We did it in part because we use this lovely room. Oh my gosh, this is so much better than anything we have. But no, it's also the things that we're talking about have an intersection with journalism. That's part of where we are. And so this is a chance to do that. We're also trying to have things that help people understand the value of information and what can be used with it to try to create things of value. I call this information entrepreneurialism. That's my term. It's not a term of science. I view it as social entrepreneurialism with information. And as you'll see, there's an aspect to that in today's talk. So thank you. And I don't see Dean Lorente. There he is. So he's the other dean. Thank you. Thanks to Dean Lorente and the Merrill School of Journalism for working with us on this event. We really appreciate it. Just for my own curiosity, how many of you are info students? Raise your hand. Oh, very nice. Very good. How many of you are, thank you, put it down. Thank you. Wonderful. How many of you are journalism students? Wonderful. Oh, that's really great. And I know some of you are staff and some of you are others. Who is a student from another college? Oh, you could raise your hand higher. Go ahead. Okay, very good. We have someone from another college. Welcome here. Oh, another one there. She kept her hand low too. Welcome here. You're all welcome. So today it's my great pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speaker, David Plotz. David is the founder and the CEO of CityCast. And if you're not a member listening to CityCast, you should do it. Get out your phone and subscribe now and get the newsletter. It's a wonderful local podcast network that ties together the community with what's going on. There's one here in DC. There's 11 across the nation. He was the CEO of Atlas Obscura. If you've never read Atlas Obscura, go sign up. It's really worth looking at. The information is fine. People get lost in it. Finish your homework first, and then go look at Atlas Obscura. There's really a lot there. And before that, he was the editor of Slate magazine, the online magazine, plus working there for many years. He's the author of 2 books, and he is the longtime host, or mostly the host of the Slate Political Gabfest. Yes, it's wonderful. I've got to tell you, I first learned of David Plotz because I consume that podcast. I listen to it every Thursday. It's wonderful. It's like having a set of smart journalists in your living room talking about what's going on. I think that's all I want to say, except let's give a warm welcome to David Plotz.
Thank you so much. The idea of having a bunch of smart journalists in your living room talking, it fills me with dread. Think how terrible that would be if you came into your living room and there were a bunch of smart journalists and you're like, I just want to watch TV. Thank you all so much for having me out here today. It's a pleasure. I'm not from the world of academia, and so it's really nice to be in a school, to talk to students, to talk to professors. And I hope that what I talk about today can inform a little bit of what you're doing. There are going to be a lot of slides, so get ready. Most of you are too young to remember this, I hope, except I remember it. Keith remembers it. But during the second half of the 20th century, from the end of World War II until 1989, there was a nation called Yugoslavia. And it occupied the land that's now been divided up into Slovenia and Montenegro and Bosnia and Serbia and Croatia and North Macedonia. Never forget North Macedonia. And Yugoslavia was a communist nation, and it had a really charismatic dictator named Josip Tito, and he was committed to building a distinct Yugoslavian national identity. And he was going to take these people who were historically divided by religion and by culture and by language and form them into a single nation. And Yugoslavia had been born in the wreckage of World War II, And it was central to Tito's national project that during the war, some people in Yugoslavia, by no means all Yugoslavs, had resisted the Nazis and had fought partisan battles to drive them out of the country. So starting in the 1950s, Tito decided the way to build this national identity was to commemorate the national resistance to the Nazis and the socialist revolution that came along with it. So across Yugoslavia, in any place you can think of, in valleys, on hilltops, in forests, in little villages, he began building monument after monument after monument to the events of the war. These monuments celebrated victories by the partisans. They celebrated, or they mourned, atrocities by the Nazis. They commemorated village rebellions. This one in Serbia is a memorial to the fallen soldiers and veterans of the Chachuk partisan brigade. And these monuments had a name. They were called spomeniks, and they did not look like anything the world had ever seen before. Across the rest of the communist world, under Soviet influence, they were building monuments, not like that, monuments of what they called socialist realism. And the idea of socialist realism, we're going to have these massive, titanic workers and soldiers idealized and carrying hammers and sickles and plows. But Yugoslavia's spomeniks looked really different. They were weird. They were magical. They were kind of glorious. My feeling about when I look at them, I'm always like, if an alien came down and won a victory in its battle, the alien would build a monument that looked like this. These monuments are in strange shapes. They're in kind of unnatural shapes. A lot of them defy gravity. They have wings. And Tito and his architects had invented this new architectural style. And they called it came to be known as sort of decontextualized abstraction. And the idea was that if you made abstract monuments, not monuments of people, but monuments of these shapes and shapes, monuments of shapes, that you would get beyond the kind of national identities and specific national feelings. You'd forge a new nation somehow, because everyone could look at these monuments and feel what they wanted to feel. It wouldn't feel like I'm a Serb. They would feel something broader and grander. And so from 1960 until 1989, as I said, they built thousands of them. And then 1989 came along, communism ended, Yugoslavia fell apart, and they just started to forget about these monuments. When Yugoslavia fell apart, these communist symbols were ignored. They were considered kind of positively dangerous because they were opposed to the new identities that were emerging in post-communism part of the world, and to the new Serbian identities or Croat identities or Bosnian identities, and the sense of there was no longer a sense of a shared Yugoslav identity. And so the spomeniks decayed, and they were overgrown, and they were more or less forgotten. And then about 15 years ago, something interesting started to happen. And the interesting thing is that foreign visitors to Yugoslavia, or to the new countries, to Serbia and Croatia and Bosnia, started noticing these old weird monuments and started to photograph them, and they photographed them in cool ways, a la here. A website that I came to be associated with called Atlas Obscura launched, and the purpose of Atlas Obscura was to document all the bizarre and obscure and wonderful weirdness in the world. And so users of Atlas Obscura began submitting spomenik entries to the Atlas. And soon Atlas Obscura had collected and mapped dozens of these spomeniks. And then something else started to happen, which is that travelers to Slovenia and Croatia and Serbia began using Atlas Obscura to go explore them, to go explore the spomeniks and add more of them to the Atlas. And then a website and Instagram account called the Spomenik Database began a comprehensive effort to photograph and document all the spomeniks they could document. I became CEO of Atlas Obscura in 2015, sort of midway through this. We kept adding more and more Spomenics to the Atlas Obscura database and sharing them in articles and newsletters that began reaching Atlas Obscura's millions of readers. And a couple of years later, we took it a step further. In 2017, we partnered with a local historian in the Balkans and a guide, and we began leading groups of tourists, non-Serbian tourists, on Spomenic trips across the Balkans. This is an ad. I mean, Atlas Obscura is still leading these trips. And so what had happened was that these forgotten and neglected and collapsing monuments became once again a source of great local pride and of economic opportunity. And they were being chronicled and documented, their history preserved. And the documentation of this, the restoration of the Spomenics and the documenting of the Spomenics, is a vivid example, I think, of what your dean calls information entrepreneurship in action. Atlas Obscura and the Spomenic database collected and organized and shared digital information about the Spomenics, photos, histories, map data, visiting advice. And once that digital information was organized and made accessible online on the internet, on Instagram, it made the Spomenics valuable again. The Spomenics brought visitors and money and study to remote regions of Slovenia and Croatia. And it led to a movement within those countries where they were to preserve and maintain them. So here is what one of these Spomenics looked like before 2013. It was photographed. It's in Vukovar, Croatia. It's dedicated to 455 civilians who were executed by pro-Nazi forces between 1941 and 1943 at this site. And this is what it looks like now, restored to how its original state. So why did I just spend a whole bunch of time telling you about a bunch of weird Croatian monuments? Here's why. In a time of AI mania, if I had $1 for every conversation I had about AI, I would be as rich as Sam Altman is. In a time of AI mania and digital creation, in a space like this, in a school like this, you may be sometimes overcome by a depressing feeling. And the depressing feeling is that all the information that you work with all day is just flat and electronic. It may sometimes seem to you that the purpose of the information is just to create digital experiences for people on a screen. I am particularly gripped by this feeling of the sense of like digital ennui when people talk about how incredible the new AI large language models are and how well ChatGPT recreates human interaction. And all I want to scream is that it's not recreating human interaction. All this is doing is outputting bits and bytes onto a screen. They flash on a screen before me. That is not, to me, human interaction. All over the world, we're cutting and packaging and repackaging information for what feels sometimes like fundamentally arid electronic activity. So if you think of the entire crypto industry, it's just like massive amounts of electric power and electronic power to create a store of value that can only exist electronically, can only be traded with people at a distance from each other through a screen. Or if you think about what is social media exists to put you at a physical distance from other people, to give you a social experience that is only by screens, on screens, through screens. I am old, and because I am old, this all feels deeply inhuman to me. And so I'm here today. The reason I wanted to talk to you all today is to remind you of the capacity for information, for well-organized, well-preserved, truthful digital information to create human experiences that people crave in the real physical world. For me, the most exciting things in the world of information are not the harnessing of extraordinary amounts of computing power to create digital writing or pretend money. It's the most exciting thing is to take all this information and to create action and experience and change in the physical world. So what are examples of what I'm talking about, and how Can you go do them? I want to go back to Atlas Obscura because in the work of Atlas Obscura, we set ourselves the project of turning a digital platform into a tool for real-world experience. So Atlas Obscura has users across the world submit places and foods that are wondrous and extraordinary and not well known enough. So during the time I was there, we had about 20,000 entries that were submitted and edited by about 30,000 users and read by about 7 million people every month. This, for example, is the Gates of Hell, which is a flaming pit in the Karakoram Desert in Turkmenistan. It's been burning for 50 years when a Soviet gas drilling rig accidentally set it on fire. And there's a gas chamber underneath that's just been burning. And they thought about putting it out. The government of Turkmenistan thought about putting it out a few years ago. And then they realized it was an enormous source of tourist dollars. And they have left it burning. This is the Garden of Cosmic Speculation, which is a Scottish garden that represents in landscape form concepts of theoretical physics. This one I really like. It's the Japanese island ruled by cats. So before Atlas Obscura came along, these places were rarely seen. They were little known outside their neighborhood. Atlas Obscura created a home for them, organized them all, mapped them all, gave descriptions of how you could visit them, and thus invented a whole new kind of traveling. There are now people all over the world who use Atlas Obscura to explore and experience the world in a way that wasn't possible before. And it's not just about creating tourism, too. I mean, this is Mount, I'm going to misbutcher the pronunciation, Bezludza. It's a flying saucer, basically. It's the Bulgarian Communist Party headquarters. We listed it in Atlas Obscura and began taking tours to it. And as a result, it sort of became this iconic place. It's such an amazing looking place. And it's now being preserved. It's listed as one of the 7 most endangered heritage sites in Europe, and it's earmarked for preservation. These are the root bridges of Cherrapunji, India, which are some of the most extraordinary creations on Earth. There was a tradition of building bridges across streams by taking living roots and hooking them up, more or less, and allowing the roots to grow into each other. And if you did that long enough and with enough roots, you could build bridges that could hold a car. You could hold as much traffic as you need to hold. And these bridges, this craft was dying out. And then as it became known around the world through Atlas Obscura, other forms of other guides, it has become a revived craft. And it's about to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But there are, of course, all kinds of ways to organize digital information to create real-world change. I really like this one, iNaturalist, which is a very interesting accidental form of this. So it's a nature app, and it allows you to identify plants and animals. If you see a bug, you wonder what it is, you can take a photograph of it and send it to experts, send it to sort of the central hub for identification. And it's had this amazing accidental effect, because when thousands and thousands and thousands and millions of people are taking photographs of plants and animals, suddenly you have a new database of where plants and animals are. And each time that someone sent a photo or noted the existence of a plant or animal in a location, it's another data point. And, this plant is here, this bird is there. And it became this form of scientific research, accidental scientific research, because it's created a picture of the natural world as it is, as people are experiencing it in a way that had never been mapped before. Another kind of example of this, which is a little bit goofier, is home exchange. I don't know if you all know this, wonderful manifestation of the sharing economy. It's a platform that allows you to list your home as a place that other people can stay for free. In exchange, they are expected to list their home so that you can go stay in their home for free. So I, over the years, have exchanged my house for a house in Brittany, France, and for an apartment in Barcelona and for a beach house in San Diego. And each time you are creating an enormous amount of social trust and human connection that never existed, because the idea of like giving over your toilet to some other random family, giving over in some cases, we once showed up, my brother and I did a home exchange in a house in Ireland. We showed up at the house in Ireland and they hadn't mentioned that they had a dog. And so all of a sudden we had care of a dog for a week that we didn't know about. Often you're exchanging a car, you're letting a stranger drive your car. And so the existence of this database, the existence of this way to match you up with some other person has this effect of creating social trust and social capital. You're increasing the store of social capital because you are allowing yourself to put your property in the hands of others, and you have to trust them to do it, and they put their property in the hands of you, and you've got to be a good steward of their property. And it's built. I'm still friends with the folks whose Barcelona apartment my children ruined. And finally, I'll turn, just because you can't do a talk without log rolling, to my current project, which is CityCast, and Dean mentioned it a moment ago. It's a network of daily local podcasts and newsletters. And if you are here in DC, I strongly recommend you subscribe to CityCast DC, the podcast, and the newsletter, which is called Hey DC. They're great. They're really, really good. And the explicit mission of CityCast, we call them news podcasts and a newsletter, but it's not really about news. The goal is to make people better citizens of their cities. And the approach to it is not really about information. It's not based on the idea that we're informing you of events. We do inform you of events, but the purpose is to make you feel more connected to the city and give you the tools to be a more active citizen of the city. So it is distinctly not like we want you to be a sort of sit back consumer of it. It's we want you to take what we're giving you in CityCast and in Hey DC and act as a citizen in your city. So for example, there's a weekly feature that we do called How Do I? And it answers basic questions about city living that that aren't obvious, but are really important. So like, what am I actually allowed to recycle? For example, do you have any idea what you're allowed to recycle? I didn't until I read what I was allowed to recycle. Or if you were prescribed, as I was, a huge amount of oxycodone because you had surgery, and you didn't take the oxycodone, what are you supposed to do with it? How do you dispose of your extra oxycodone? So that answered a question. Or how do I get a residential parking permit? Or this is the most popular thing we've ever done, which is free things to get with your library card that aren't books. So it turns out that a lot of library cards, you can go and get plants and seeds and power tools if you want to check them out from the library. And so if you read this newsletter or you listen to this podcast, you'll likely end up knowing the news of the city, but it's definitely the case that you'll be better, more active citizen of the city, and you'll be better at navigating the city than you would otherwise. And so let me just close with a little exhortation. You're all in extraordinary programs here, and it's probably going to be your life work if you were a student, an important life's work to make sense of all of the, I don't know anyone, I literally know no one in my own social world who doesn't spend their life with tons of digital information. We all spend our life with tons of digital information, no matter what job you have. If you've gone to college in this country, it is almost certainly the case that you're going to spend your life manipulating tons of digital information, and it's being churned out in a massive scale across the globe. But I want to encourage you, as you think about putting these great skills that you're learning to work, to consider looking for opportunities that allow you to connect these pulses, these bits on a screen, to the real world around you, and to take all this data and think about how can this improve how people live in the real and physical and human world. Thank you very much. That's how you can reach me.
So we're going to talk for 2 minutes. Get your questions ready. We're going to allow some vehicles to ask questions. If you have questions of me too, but you could do that anytime. I think we're here. This is the first time we've done that. How the microphones are.
Hello? No.
That's working? Can you hear me?
Hands. I have a super loud voice, though.
YouTube. Well, whatever you wish. Okay, we're just going to do it. The problem is we're recording this, and so people may want to see it later. Tech. Okay, we're going to do that. That sounds good.
This one's not on anymore.
We're just going to do it. Okay. So I really enjoyed your talk, and you may not know, but the motto of our college is information and technology for good. And so many of the things you were saying resonate very much with my students too. I'm sure that already some of them were shaking their head and saying, yeah, I'm already doing that. So that's really good. But the part I want to talk about is this issue of placemaking. Placemaking is a concept where how can you help a community define itself? And it's a broad term, but it seems to me that's what you're doing, right? With Alice Secure helping other communities define themselves, and CityCast is really helping communities. And that seems to be an unusual thing for journalism. So I'm wondering, is this where journalism is going? Should we be partnering more with this, or is it just your special talent?
Matt, do you think the UVA's motto is information and technology for bad?
Yeah.
I think so. The reason that I worked for years at Slate, which is an online political magazine, and I wrote a ton about politics, and I became and I still host a political podcast, but it is with no love that I host it. No love for the subject. I became very unhappy in the sort of pre-Trump Washington with the poisonousness of politics. And it occurred to me, and this is one reason I started at Atlas Obscura, but it's even more at CityCast, was that at CityCast, I think cities are a place where, because people live so close together, they kind of have to find ways to live with each other, and they have to find ways to live with each other for the most part without being monsters to each other. Whereas, and this goes back to sort of my sense of digital alienation, that one of the problems with the electronic world that we live in is it allows you to be an asshole at a distance in a way you would never be an asshole to somebody in person. But cities, you're always kind of in person with people. And so when I think about my hope for the country, it's really based on the idea that the more proximity, the more we know each other, the more connected we are to each other in proximity to people who are a little bit unlike us, the better off we'll be. And so I think of CityCast as being a tool to really help that, because it's sort of saying, cities are filled with contention. They're filled with people disagree about everything. They disagree about all the subjects, but because we're living so close together, you kind of have to find ways to solve it. And so there's a hopefulness about cities and their ability to problem solve that I really don't feel within the nation as a whole. So I kind of feel like the unit of productive activity in this country is no longer the nation. It is the small unit is where things can get done and accomplished. And so that's where I like to work.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a tremendous place of leverage. So my college likes to work in libraries, which is another kind of third place, which is now being attacked with all the book bans and such, of course. And so what is the way forward? Is how should we build these things without them becoming attacked?
It is
I'm getting texts that your microphone shouldn't be working.
Oh,
Test.
hello. Yeah, we're good.
Thanks, Raphael.
That's a really great question, and I mean, it's certainly one I feel a tremendous amount of despair around. I mean, as somebody who grew up in libraries, in one of our CityCast cities in Boise, Idaho, which is a city, unlike most cities, Boise, Idaho, has a lot of Republicans in it, and most American cities. And there was a movement that would literally have abolished the entire library system, and it got pretty close. They got pretty close to doing it. I don't know. What do you guys think? How to prevent that? I mean, it's not enough to just say like our books are good. There has to be something else. What have you found?
I think one of the strengths that public libraries have had for a long time is that they have a strong community advisory board, and those boards are able to help them communicate what their values should be. So you'll see a library in a more conservative community being more conservative and a more liberal community being more liberal. But I think that the problem has been that there's a lot of interest now in attacking things with trust, because you can then capitalize on that. And libraries have had some of the highest trust in the United States, but so they're the ripe target. So I think they're being overwhelmed, is my sense.
Yeah. I mean, I just going back to that slide I showed about other things that you can get at the library. One of the things I love about the library in DC, and I think this is true in a lot of cities around the country now, is that the library is really very much not a place to get books. I mean, you can get books, but that is an incidental activity, or only one of many activities. And that I have friends who've done their startups out of DC Public Library, all the community meetings that are always happening at the library. And so the idea that maybe it loses some of its trust around books because of this campaign against it, but maybe it can build it around these other ways it can be a gathering place. But it is. Yeah, I don't have a good answer.
I don't think any of us do. Take it to the next step, though. Let's imagine a successful CityCast, which I would love to have. I feel like I'm more of a DC person because I listen to CityCast. Subscribe to it. How can CityCast protect itself, or things like that? I think you're doing it to some degree by bringing in lots of voices and working with the community. How do you think about building trust?
We think about that a lot, and one of the things that has really preoccupied us is making sure that we're representing the community broadly. So one of the things that we do is we keep a survey of every single person that appears on our podcast, and we track what neighborhood they're from, how old they are, their gender, their race, and we do that so that we can look back at every year and say, are we actually representing the city that we're covering? Or are we, are we just, finding a very narrow group of people to talk to and talk about? And so that's one key way we do it. Another key way we do it is we have a very young audience, and we try to have a young audience, because our view is that like a lot of the kind of more calcified and difficult people in any community are the old people. And I count myself among them. And having a younger audience that is, they're more open, more curious, more welcoming to the possibilities of their city, we think creates a healthier, well, it certainly will create a healthier economic future because it's more attractive to advertisers, but that's not it. But it also creates a healthier product, because it feels more in touch with the future rather than people's idealized version of what this city used to be.
Mm. I was privileged to chair the search for this last dean, the one that chose Dean Lorente.
He's really good with texting. It's excellent. He's got it.
He's amazing. And one of the things every candidate that came through, they were asked, local news is dead, or local news is dying. And yet I listened to CityCast. But what CityCast is doing is not exactly local news. So I'm wondering, is that the future of local news, or where should we be going?
Well, I think we're one small piece of the future of local news. I kind of think there are two stories happening around local news. One story is local news is dying, and it is absolutely true that if you look at tons of counties in this country no longer have a functioning newspaper. There are vast areas in this country where there's really no effective accountability journalism at all at a local level. That's 100% happening, and I'm really glad to see that Knight Foundation and others are putting a lot of money into these small startups that are going to they're going to fight back against some of it. At the level of the prosperous American cities, I think local journalism is in fantastic shape. It is true that the daily newspaper, which was the main constituent of that, is in terrible shape. But there's this flourishing of great startups, some of which are highly local, some of which are highly specialized. So I don't know if you all know VoteBeat or Chalkbeat, which covers education, but it does it in a bunch of local cities. And so I'm less despairing about the state of local journalism in a city like Washington, which has tons of outlets, or Chicago, but it is these smaller communities where the problem is profound, and I don't think there's an easy fix, and I just don't think that the money. I think the solution cannot be a nonprofit solution. It will not. It's not sustainable to think that a bunch of foundations are going to be able to fund these nonprofit media outlets long enough for them to become viable. It's just the solution you have to find for-profit models that are gonna work for this to sustain over time. And I think that's super hard in the small communities.
Right. So the other solution is automation, and you and I both talked to a reporter on this, and I think she telegraphed the fact that she fears for the future of journalism because those large language models are going to end up taking these jobs away.
But that's not like that is it. They will provide information. It is true. If you're going to get high school sports scores or a game report on the Orioles game last night, automation can provide that fine. That's not journalism. That's not what people need. People need connection. They need human stories. They need emotion. Information is not journalism. Journalism is all these others. It's the storytelling. It's the human connection. It's the contextualization. It's making you feel the sense of place. And it's making you feel an emotion. It's making you angry. It's one of the things that I say about CityCast, and when I look to hire a host for a podcast, is I always look for the person in the city who loves Denver more than anybody else and thinks Denver is more fucked up than anybody else does. And because that person is going to make you feel something. And I feel like that's where there are a lot of jobs in journalism that will disappear, which are jobs which are focused on the processing of information. But the work of telling people stories about their community, it goes on, and their jobs for all of these people here
may even become more vital, right? Because there will be more information produced automatically, and therefore you have to hunt for the more human information. That makes sense. I do want to invite other people to ask questions. Does anyone have a question? Please come up to the microphone. Is that the only microphone?
One there, too.
If you have questions, please start lining up. You got a jog over here.
I think it's on. But
okay, it's on. So my question is kind of playing off of the one you asked before about how libraries are being kind of attacked and with like the books and such. I was curious. The CityCast sounds like it has the potential to be incredibly influential and like it could do a lot of good for the communities that it serves. But one of the best ways I've come across combating that standpoint of people going against the libraries and the books that are in them is education. So I was curious as to if CityCast has anybody on it or plans to do anything about education, because there's multiple studies that show the more education and the better education you get, the less bigoted you become, and you have a more understanding and liberal viewpoint. And I think that's kind of how we combat the anti-library and book sentiment. So I was curious if you, as the CEO of CityCast, are taking that avenue or have thought about it in any way.
Well, it's really interesting. One of the very disturbing things that's happening in this country is a partisan divide over education, and that you have now education is seen as sort of a blue thing. It's a democratic thing to get education. And that worries me. It worries me that education has become politicized, because we need educated people who love free markets and educated people who love Bernie Sanders. And it's not at all good that Republicans have seen it as a real opportunity to get back at the elites. And I think that's where libraries are suffering. Is that these are these pointy-headed people from the cities who have their views about what, my kid should be taught about sex and race, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And it's a really disturbing trend, and it's actually leading to lower college enrollments. If you look at political ideology, if you look at, do people want their kids to go to college? The more conservative you are, the less likely it is now that you want your kid to go to college. And it's really bad. I don't know that there's, how is it, what's the fight back?
That's kind of what I was thinking about too. But I mean, a host or somebody maybe on the podcast that kind of says what you just said to show another side of the viewpoint, that education is still important no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, because we see tons of people attacking school boards on the daily, and schools, especially public schools, are the backbones of a lot of cities. That they keep kids in programs, they keep them going through the school system so they eventually get out, and especially for people who are below the poverty line, it keeps them in situations where they can succeed and continue to grow. While a lot of the funding is cut from those public schools, I think that leads to obviously more conservative viewpoints, and then that just feeds the cycle of not wanting to have good education in public schools because of the prior statements, which feeds into the libraries. So I'm not too sure what the answer is. I
think this is what you were saying earlier, Keith. It's just like this building mistrust. It's this almost an active campaign to make people mistrust institutions that they trusted. The idea that public school teachers are somehow now sort of villains in American life is so bizarre and disgusting. And
it wasn't that long ago when they were highly respected.
Yeah. And the undermining of whether it's public health in the sort of public health and science administration of the country, public schools, public libraries, the undermining of the trust is really destructive.
Awesome, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. So you were saying that, technology, especially AI, has become inhuman, right? It has lost its, human element sort of thing. So what do you think can be done to, humanize it again? Like, what can be added to it, basically? My question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a technologist, so I'm gonna offer a really ignorant answer. I think it's less. It's a matter of thinking. I guess it kind of goes to the answer I was just giving about what is journalism. It's when you're approaching a technological problem, it's a mindset to think like the problem I'm trying to solve is not really a technological problem. It's a problem for human beings. And what do human beings care about? Being loved, being touched, having friendships, having, feeling safe, having physical pleasure. So how am I solving that problem? And like, if everyone thought a little bit more about that, I feel like technology would be happier than it is. But I don't like that. that's sort of an it's really about the mindset more than it is about any one particular answer.
Right. Thank you for the answer.
Hi, David. I'm Tori. I'm a journalism senior here at Merrill College. I have two questions for you. One is, what is your favorite local site that's on Atlas Obscura?
My favorite local place in the area?
Like the DMV area.
Okay, I'll give one I have a super vested interest in because I take tours of it, and I think it's an amazing place. I lead tours of it. It's called Fort DeRussy. In the middle of Rock Creek Park, just south of the Maryland border, is a old Civil War fort that is just overgrown by trees, and it's just in the woods. And it has, when you start to read about it, it has this incredible history. There was a battle fought there in 1864 that was a remarkable battle, had things turned out a little bit differently. The war would have gone very differently, but nobody knows about it. I grew up a mile from it. I never went there. And it's just like you can walk through the woods. You might not even notice it. It's very subtle. But once you are there and you sort of experience it, it's like, wow, there's this place. I did not need to go across the world to see something incredible. It's right here. So that's one.
Thank you. Part two is, how do you choose where you're setting up your city cast?
We were just talking about this before. A little bit of science, a little bit of art, and a lot of just randomness. We picked. So we were owned by a big company called Graham Holdings, which you may know is it was the Washington Post company. It was the company that used to own the Washington Post, and the Graham family. It's this family that owned the Washington Post continued to have a big media interest. And they have a lot of local products and a lot in podcasting, and so they're pretty well funded and profitable company. And so they encouraged us to they are betting on us for the long term. So they're like, I want you to try it in a bunch of different cities. So we tried it in big cities, medium-sized cities, and small cities, and we've tried it in different regions just to see, could we see a pattern? And what we've seen so far is that it's very hard to build CityCast in a very big city, because in a big city, there's just the idea that one podcast once a day could possibly capture the experience of that city is ludicrous. Like Chicago is 47 different neighborhoods. It's a metro area of 10 million people. We think one podcast is enough to educate you. It can't do it. But in a city like Madison, Wisconsin, where you're talking to a couple 100,000 people, it makes a lot more sense, and it's easier to become a big fish sooner. So we think it's sort of smaller cities probably make sense, small and medium-sized cities, and then cities that are, for lack of a better word, patriotic. The cities that are really proud of themselves seem to groove to it. Like a city where they're like, it's so cool that I'm from Austin. I love Austin. Austin's awesome. Every other city sucks. Like that kind of attitude seems to correlate to people liking the pod, because people are feeling great about their city, and we want to be in a place where people are feeling like their city matters. But that's a long answer to your short question.
It's a good answer. Thank you. That's all I got.
Hi. So you touched on kind of how there's this misconception currently that journalism will just become another form of writing that AI can replicate. And do you think that misconception kind of circling around will have a negative impact on, just the way that journalism is valued or funded? And how do you think we can combat that misconception as journalists and change people's mind on that?
Yeah. The one thing that we saw over the past 20 years is these kind of private equity assholes would come in and buy up the newspapers, just grind them up, sell off the real estate, cut the staffs to nothing, and rely on non-human labor to create the work of the newspaper. And the newspapers got worse and worse and worse and devalued in their communities, and sometimes survived, sometimes didn't. And so that's there. We've already seen this happen even without AI. It's basically been happening. And I think the way you fight back is it's kind of obvious, is that you create great fucking journalism, and you do it and you don't try to do it like, you don't say, oh, we've got to just replicate what the Burlington Free Press was 30 years ago. It's do it a new way. So if you think about the places where I'm super excited about journalism, it's where people are doing new kinds of journalism, but which are so connected to their community or to their subject and are essential. I am like so bullish about the future of journalism. I am more bullish than I have ever been, because I do think that as a profession, we've realized that it isn't. I think for a long time, a lot of people thought, oh, it's just churning out information for people. But people now know it's not that. It's building community. It's building connection. It's telling stories. And those things, there's an endless hunger for. And there's new ways to do it, whether you're doing it in podcasting, whether you're doing it in video, whether you're doing it on social platforms. And it's fucking awesome. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because you will have a great job in 3 years and be doing something really cool.
Yeah, well, I'm probably not in 3 years. I edit for my high school paper. I'm still in high school. Thank you for your answer. It definitely speaks to me.
That's like a mic drop of all mic drops right there.
Any other questions? Well, let's thank David Plotz.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks. What did you teach on?
And truly, like any of you who are in journalists, aspiring journalists, just curious about, I'm super easy to reach. I'm just my name at gmail.com, where you can find me, and please reach out. Thank you.